Hello, everyone. Okay, hope you had a nice lunch break. I'm really glad to be in front of you with my colleagues. My name is Boban, and I'm a chairperson of Serbian AI Society. We are an NGO founded in 2020 with the goal to help development of local AI ecosystem. Today, I have a great honor to have three of our members from Serbian AI Society that will share their story about data challenges in AI. So if you had a chance to already listen to some of the talks, you saw that a common theme of data is prolonged in all of the talks, panel discussions. In this session, we will continue in the same manner. So each of our presenters and speakers will share their perspective on how data and AI are shaping their regular and daily work. And hopefully, this will spark some interesting discussions that we can also follow up outside of the session. So when we were preparing initially for this talk, I think the first association when it comes to radiology, technology, and law was data. In different perspectives, but data was the common theme. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our colleague, Ivana. She's a radiologist, and besides just doing radiology and spending it as a core focus on her daily work and business, she's also covering several special projects. So I think you'll be able to hear a really interesting perspective from her side when it comes to data, AI, and radiology. And Ivana, since you have really rich experience in this area, I think you're also exposed to data in a physical form, from like physical paper, all the way to the AI models. So from your perspective as a radiologist, how does this world of AI and data looks to you?
Well, hi, first of all. Since I'm a radiologist and I'm basically in a clinical practice like last 20 years, 15 years as a radiologist, so I've been there and I've done that using data, especially medical images, in film, let's say. Also, we used paper, like for medical history of the patient, like records. But and I was there looking how that's changing, basically. So today we got electronic medical records, and of course we got PACS for images for storage, and that health industry basically is growing, rapidly growing in healthcare in general, and health industry infrastructure within hospitals, and also training for medical staff. Not just doctors, but also everyone who's involved in healthcare, like nurses and non-medical staff that is engaged in hospitals. So they all go through training to use, let's say, electronic devices and to use electronic data to manage data, not just for everyday clinical purpose, but also for research. And for, let's say, today we live in an era of AI development, especially in radiology. So how to use that data for research, for analytics, for building any AI models. So yeah, I think it's growing very, very quick. And I remember when I was at the beginning, like maybe 15 years ago, like a radiology resident, it was very hard, and it took a lot of time. Basically, if you want to download CT of some patient and to see, his coronary arteries or his heart, how that looks like on CT, it took a lot of time. And first to find that CT somewhere in some room in storage, and then also to find his medical record. And currently now, it's much easier. It's just like basically one click to find everything you need about that person, that patient, not just images, but also any data about his age, you know, like his previous medical record and all of it. So yeah, I've been there, I've done that, and I can say that from current perspective, definitely with digitalization and with this technology that we have now, in general, including healthcare, I think that definitely we are saving our time. There's no wasting of time to find data to, especially when we talk about healthcare. But on the other hand, there are some issues like, you know, like data privacy of every patient. But so Anya will talk about it later. But definitely we need to take care about that certain issue, like how to work on how to save patient privacy in every single way. So yeah.
So we mentioned when we were speaking before the session several projects and let's say hands-on experiences between the radiology and AI. So can you also share a bit more about some of the ongoing work that you're covering at the moment?
Yes, sure. Well, basically, AI development in radiology is growing also very quick, very fast. And what I can say, since 5 or 6 years ago until today, it's basically a lot of AI models are built into clinical workflow all over the world. And I think based on sharing my experiences with my colleagues, they are basically they like using AI models, and it saves their time because usually they are overwhelmed with a lot of cases, you know, and clinical workflow every day. So basically, it saves use AI models. There's no wasting the time, you know, like it was before. It helps also in every single way, not just for providing data about certain patients, but also it's very valuable for diagnostics, for triage, and it's used. It started in radiology, but now it's used also in other fields of healthcare, like pathology, epidemiology, public health, of course, all over the healthcare. So it's growing, and a lot of AI models are building, not just all over the world. So a lot of companies are included. But yeah, the most important part of that is data, because we need to, in order to build any AI model, we need a lot of data, first of all. And second of all, also there's ethical issues and law issues, of course. And what I can see that a lot of radiologists and a lot of medical doctors are included in these kind of projects, and providing clinical input and providing, you know, like their clinical expertise. And they are going through the training there to learn more about technical skills. And on the other hand, what I can see from my personal experience, a lot of machine learning scientists, they are that are engaged in healthcare, building AI models in healthcare. They are also learning a lot about clinical workflow. So I think it's a good match, basically. So to learn something new that is valuable for ecosystem in general. Yeah.
So, quick question: are your colleagues afraid of the current state of AI? What's the general feeling?
My personal impression is that younger colleagues, you know, they are very interested about using AI in clinical workflow. But older one, they do afraid, I guess, you know. probably because they are not so familiar in general with digitalization, but younger people, they are very interesting. For example, we had that conference on radiology conference. It was, I think, a month ago, and in the audience there were all young people, like here mostly now, but other older doctors, you know, like let's say more experienced doctors, not to say older, but more experienced doctors and professors and I don't know, like chief of radiology departments from different hospitals in Serbia. They were not present there. I think but they would like to hear about it, but somehow I don't know. But younger people, yeah, they're very interesting. Is there how to use that? You don't use that much AI models currently in Serbia, but they are interested. They are interested. How to use that, how that works, what can I do with that? Is there anything that I can get more experience about that, about knowledge about that? So probably I think it would be very valuable to include more people from healthcare. Yeah, and because basically, in order to build any AI model in healthcare, especially in radiology, you need clinical input and also someone who's going to clean data, who's going to work on data sets, who's going to work on, let's say, data set curation. So, but I think it will come here very fast.
We'll get maybe to some of the questions later on the maybe challenges or opportunities in collaboration between the radiologists and technical colleagues, but just to maybe also transition to Dejan. So you had the opportunity to start your AI journey here in Serbia, University of Novi Sad, but really quickly after your, I believe, master studies, you had the opportunity to chase development across the pond in the USA and the Rice University. So combining your experience at university and the, let's say, next steps of your career, you position yourself in a really interesting space of AI, close to the LLMs, and more precisely, compilers, which bring a lot of benefits. So we, I believe, heard that there are challenges when there is not enough data to train a model, to play and get different insights. But what about situations when there is plenty of data, like more than enough, maybe even too much, if there is that kind of, let's say, context, but it is in the different modalities. So each data set is a different modality. It's maybe a user engagement. It's some other stuff of data. So how do you approach that situation?
Oh, that was a lot of questions in one. So let's try to break it down a little bit. Let me first say a few things about this area, which is intersection between systems and AI. So I believe there are a lot of people that are focusing solely on modeling side, trying to use data, trying to find the best model on Hugging Face, learn to use PyTorch, but this is just beginning. Like, you have to have data, and that's number one. And for many of cases, like if you're trying to solve specialist problem, focusing on one particular area of training, you might be able to train one single model on one GPU. But if you have a situation that you're working in a company like Meta, in my case, which is trying to collect the user engagement, you have a gigabytes of data per user. You know, you have different modalities across data. You have comments, likes, you have shares, you have different stuff. And there are two challenges there. First, how to handle different modalities across data to create a unique embedding space that defines a user and their interactions to items that are being recommended. And on the other side, how to handle the inference. Everything needs to be in the real time. So you need to focus on efficient algorithms to host the models. And that is something that is not commonly talked in general. You know, it's not as sexy, I guess, as talking about the benchmarks and cool metrics and all of these cool applications. But underneath, there is a huge area of work which is in all of these companies, and there is a huge need to employ engineers who know how to optimize kernels in Triton, in different for PyTorch, for example, but also that knows modeling side. So you know about the opportunities that you can actually optimize. So I believe like machine learning is not enough by itself, and handling data is not enough by itself. If you want to really solve the problems and unlock some new opportunities, such might be like rendering in real time of some video, or like using like a Sora as a model for OpenAI, and generating these videos that doesn't take like 20 minutes for one video, but actually goes in seconds. You need to think about inference. You need to think about multiple algorithms that enable you to host model of like 400 billion parameters. That thing doesn't go on one GPU. That thing goes across like 8 or 16 GPUs. You need to figure out how pipelining works, how fully sharded data parallel things works. And the key thing is to create a pipelines from collecting data to clearing data up. Everything needs to run smoothly. And there is like a bunch of other stuff that we need to think about when think about AI.
So that is when it comes to optimization of the whole process. And we're speaking a lot about training, like preparing the model, creating a model. What is the story after the model is creating? What about the post-training? So how to observe that process?
Yeah, right. In many companies, you usually try to train once to create a really good pre-trained model. And then from that point on, you're using that pre-trained model to get extra, fine-tuning and RLHF on top of that to even more like specialize your application. But these costs are one-time costs. So like you pay one to train, I don't know how many trillions of iteration of a model. And then after that, you have a thing called production. And it costs money to do inference on these GPUs. And it's expensive. So what you need to do, you have to optimize for an energy consumption usually on these kind of platforms, and it matters. There is a huge incentive to improve every little shard of energy that you can save. And this kind of thinking about low-level optimizations, compilers, systems, it's all integrated together. And I would encourage everybody to think deeper than algorithms, to think what actually runs on the platform and go deeper in the software stack. And I can tell you that thing is not going to be optimized by ChatGPT. Like this data is not on the internet. Like, and this expertise is something that can bring you like job security at least, but also it's kind of fun. So.
Okay, you mentioned software, but I'm going to leave that for later. A specific area of software. So I think this is a good also opportunity and time in our panel discussion to jump to, I would say, also practical perspective of data and AI. So Anja, being part of Serbian AI Society, we had an opportunity to collaborate on a lot of projects. So that's our, let's say, NGO, and what do we do in supporting the ecosystem. Outside of NGO, you are part of a leading law firm, and so I think when you take your everyday work, it's oriented towards the corporate law, IT law, data regulations, but you do make a break from that sometimes and switch your focus back to the AI. Can you share a bit more about the special project that was delivered this year, LegaBot, and not just what is the LegaBot, but from your perspective, how did you prepare for the delivering of that project? What are all those nuances that you had in sense of preparing data?
Yeah, yes, of course. Thank you for the introduction. As you mentioned, my everyday work is I work in a law firm where we are mostly specializing in assisting IT companies and generally digitally oriented businesses in a variety of legal issues. So I work with legal experts who are also experts in various tech areas because we need to understand technology in order to assist our clients. So of course one of the areas of tech we have to know well is AI as well, having in mind the AI Act that was adopted this year and the rapid growth of this area of technology. Yeah, my everyday work comprises both legal aspects of AI and AI as a technology itself. And when it comes to my, let's say, after-hours activities, Legabot was one of the projects that we developed within, well, it was like privately, but with great assistance from SAIS, Serbian AI Society. So just to introduce the project briefly for those who did not try it, it was developed by two team members, myself and the team member from a technical area, who is a machine learning engineer. So what we did actually was we developed the chatbot that answers to questions of a user regarding some Serbian laws. It's fully in Serbian language, so it's intended for the Serbian market. And the main, let's say, advantage of this project is that it offers two kinds of answers. So when you ask the question regarding a certain law, it gives you the answer, like the summarized answer for those who are not legal experts and who do not like to read about all the details and legal wording, yeah, such as you, Boban. And on the other hand, it also provides the detailed, comprehensive answer, including the link to the relevant article of the law, which explains and answers to the user's questions, user's question. So the process of developing this project was really interesting, especially for me, since I do not have practical experience in developing technology. So what we did basically was we took data from publicly available texts of the laws in Serbia. Currently, we have only 5 laws in Legabot. And we use them to train ChatGPT models to answer the questions of the user. But the problem was that ChatGPT models are not familiar with Serbian laws generally. So we had to use a specific type of technology. Dan will probably understand this better than myself. It's a RAG approach. And I cannot share any more details in this regard since I'm not a tech expert. But generally, the idea was to learn ChatGPT model how to answer questions regarding this specific text we basically implemented into the program. So yeah, Legabot is it's available for anyone who wants to try it down in SAIS booth. And I believe it was a great project for myself to try to merge my legal expertise and the AI hype that's happening right now.
It's quite a pace that AI has at this point. So I believe most of the questions that I heard or from the legal part were oriented towards AI but we're going to leave that for the networking part afterwards. So if you guys have any questions about legal implications, AI law, let's revisit that at the SAIS booth or yeah, in front of the venue. But to maybe go back to the collaboration. So Anja mentioned, yeah, maybe a smaller team of technical and non-technical expertise that were put into creating Legabot. On the other side, Ivana, you were creating different models, products in the field of radiology, where collaboration with technical colleagues is really important. So you have a really good perspective of what it takes to create a good team and how to collaborate in that area. We can maybe see from your perspective, what are the maybe biggest differences in the last year when it comes to not just collaboration, but general aspect of AI and radiology. So this is not the first time on Data Science Conference. Last year you were also a speaker. So yes. What is the main, let's say, step and delta in this 1 year period on that?
From what I noticed is that I think another medical doctor was a speaker this year. I think I was the only one last year. And I'm happy for that. I would like to include more colleagues, my colleagues, that to engage basically in these kinds of projects. But also not just about Data Science Conference, but in general, what I can see that since law and engineering and clinicians, clinical practice, when we're talking about AI, there's overlapping, you know. So from my perspective, what I can see in the last few years, especially, yeah, maybe after COVID, it looks like that these specialties, they're basically more engaged with each other than before. And we are all learning, basically, and getting more experience from each other about each step in building AI models and AI development. And I think it's valuable. And I think that basically, as long as you have opportunity to learn something new and to use your knowledge and your expertise to, let's say, bring it into some team and work on something that is very useful for you as a clinician, as in your everyday clinical practice, I think that's, at least for me, personally, that's something that I'm mostly interested in right now in this part of my career after 20 years of clinical practice. But I'm also in AI Scope last 5-6 years, and I was engaged in United States, and now I'm engaged here. I work with a lot of startups from Europe and from America. So yeah, I worked with a lot of machine learning engineers and software engineers, and I think that collaboration is valuable and for me very interesting. Very interesting. It's basically about getting more. We just exchange our experiences between each other. So, and you are ready for the next project. Let's build something, you know, something else. And also as a clinician, you know, like as a clinical champion, basically, to find, to propose use cases. Like, I need this.
I think
to provide better diagnosis,
yeah,
I need this.
We are just starting to, let's say, expand the network of Serbian AI Society outside of the, let's say, the regular domain that is considered AI, so technical people or business people from the technical companies. So definitely there is a space for more collaboration, and I think it's not, let's say, a moment where we should stop. We should, let's say, intensify the collaborations that we have with different peers and expertise. So then back to you. So just to reiterate on the first part that you mentioned, it was all about infrastructure, what we can do to optimize that. I know that you're also passionate about a certain aspect of software or general tech industry, and that is open source. So what are the opportunities and what is the general vibe when it comes to open source in this AI era of technology?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Just to see if you're sleeping or you wake up. So I think this is a really important question, and this is what makes Silicon Valley and the rest of the world. We need to start as a Serbian AI society and the ecosystem to build open source projects. For that, we need talents, and then we need compute. We need companies to be engaged more in providing the resources, open sourcing their stuff, and we can provide collaborations with universities to provide talents, and we have enough members at Stanford, Berkeley, and other institutions that can provide mentorship to these students to build something amazing. And this is something where we need, as ecosystem and engineers, domain experts, and others to collaborate together. We need you to figure out if you can contribute. And first step towards that is organization of hackathon this year, where the idea was to fine-tune or like use retrieval augmented generations from RAG, from OpenAI models to create solutions dedicated for problems in community. We had about 6 teams and 6 solutions that you can find on our website, by the way, and you can try it, that are using ChatGPT and build on top of that to provide better summaries in Serbian, recommend movies in Serbian, of course, finding restaurants, and do other applications. And idea is to open source all of these projects, to make them community projects, and we invite you to bring your ideas on the table. And then we can maybe find people on master programs or some other places to work on them. We might be able to provide mentorship, and we need to start collaborating as a community together. So this is our golden opportunity to catch up with industrial revolution happening in the world. And for the first time, we just need probably our laptops and compute that we might find from Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure platforms. It's just a matter of making things together, and every of us needs to give their best to contribute. So we have no excuses, I think.
Yeah, definitely no excuses. So we are at a warm place. Outside it's snowing, but as you said, like we just need a laptop in front of us and we can get started. But maybe for some colleagues or domain experts, especially attorneys, that want to get into the AI, Anya, you had like a really practical hands-on experience with Legalbot, but what is the next that attorneys are looking in the realm of AI? So what are those next steps that attorneys can or should make in this area?
Well, I believe this question has two answers, depending on the aspect we're looking from. So on one hand, we have attorneys starting to use AI for, let's say, improving their efficiency or maybe automatization of some boring formal work. So there's a lot of legal tech software that is based on AI. And I believe that in Serbia, we're still not yet there. So there are like few law firms in Serbia, including mine, fortunately, but generally lawyers in Serbia are not that open for the use of AI, in my opinion. So I believe that we still need to spread awareness about the benefits of AI and to maybe eliminate that thought that AI is here to replace us. So I'm certain that it won't replace anyone, especially not attorneys, but it will help us be more efficient and speed up, maybe completely eliminate some activities that take most of our time, but are not like the essential legal work. And I think that would be the best application of AI in the legal world. And on the other hand, as a lawyer, I see a lot of, let's say, inquiries and questions from clients who are AI companies regarding compliance with new AI regulations. So this is something that is currently at the beginning. So we have this AI Act on the European level that is still not, it still did not enter into force, but starting in 2025, it will become very, very actual and real in practice. So we, for example, my law firm, we work with a lot of companies who are internationally present, and they have questions regarding whether AI Act is applicable on them, whether they have to comply with it, and what are the obligations arising from this act. So I believe that this is something that lawyers are definitely going to see more and more in the upcoming years, such questions from the clients, especially in this area, in this period when we still do not have any regulation in Serbia in this regard, but we expect also that to happen in the upcoming years.
As you said, the pace is pretty strong, so I believe it's for each domain experts a challenge to follow up with everything that is happening. But you mentioned that, yeah, important aspect is to share the knowledge, to share what kind of opportunities exist. We as a society aim to do that and to share with the broader public what are the, let's say, possibilities that we have. And I had a really great time at the SAIS booth speaking about everyone who visited, mostly our members, but also persons that didn't know about Serbian AI Society. And my, let's say, go-to statement every time that I'm speaking with somebody is how proud as a society we are on the educational programs we delivered for high school students. So I had to mention that here as well. It's a selfish, let's say, not to share the knowledge, especially with the young generation or like with any generation in that sense. So we as a society, as an NGO, but also like a broader society, the whole Serbia should, let's say, leverage these kind of unique opportunities that we have. We were also touching upon, let's say, USA in a few of the questions. So what are the main differences, Ivana, between collaboration on the projects that are, let's say, organized in the USA and here locally in Serbia? What is the biggest difference that you noticed?
You mean when we talk about AI development?
Yeah,
or
general radiology and connections with the tech world.
Well, last few years, what I noticed that infrastructure and is much better here than it was, let's say, before COVID. So hospitals here, they got more. In radiology, there are different modalities, and CT, MRI, scanners. So I see that equipment, medical equipment, is much better, looks much better. It's currently than it was only a few years ago. And that is a great opportunity for using use of new softwares, you know, and new and to collect data, basically to storage data that you can use for analytics, for research, for any kind of AI project in the future. But in the United States, I think they're a little bit in front of us in every single way, you know, because when I came back here 3 years ago, there was not so anywhere that much talking about AI here, especially in healthcare. And the Institute for Artificial Intelligence was founded, I think, 2022, and I came back here 2021. So, but we are catching up. And I think that at least where I was, in Boston, at Mass General Hospital, I think they work a lot on education. And they got more projects where people from our expertise are included, all of them together at one project. We still do not have projects where you can find people to get them together, engineers, lawyers, doctors, clinicians, who are going to work together on some. We still don't have that much projects that we can use in health. I'm not talking just about radiology, but I'm talking in general about healthcare. And I think data is very big issue, digitalization. So in the United States, they don't have paper medical record, you know. They got a code. So if I want to see Boban Poznanovic about him, anything, his medical record, I just need one click. But here, I need to go to some storage in some room full of, you know, papers, registers to find your in paperwork. So I think digitalization is very important if we need good quality of data and projects that we are going to use that.
We definitely made the full circle. We started from the physical paper, so we were back on that side. So you also had the opportunity to walk during your time in public hospitals and see all of those records just standing then in the physical form, not being digitalized, which is one of the bottlenecks. But as Dan said, we shouldn't find excuses. We should move forward. So one topic that is especially moving forward is high performance compute. So we definitely need compute. High performance compute might be, let's say, a good next step in supporting all of these future projects. So from your perspective, Dan, what is the next for this area of high performance computing?
Right. So how to answer that question most effectively? So high performance computing definitely became a thing with increase of data. Before that, when we were talking about scale, we were focusing on microservice architectures and basically AWS approach, which is basically you have a website, you want to scale Airbnb, let's say, and then you as a startup don't want to buy your hardware, you want to wait to see if you're going to have enough customer, and then basically use that money to pay the scale. High performance computing is different in a way that it requires specialist hardware. With development of NVIDIA graphic cards and stuff like that, it became super important for each country to enable their resources, their computer centers. One of them is building Kragujevac. I believe like people are working on expanding that even further. And it is absolutely necessary to provide our scientists the tools to build research. And I think we have really, really good people here, but often they have to leave to like Cambridge or like MIT or other institutions because they cannot build their stuff here. And that might be a problem. And what's also like difference between like a Silicon Valley and here, like people in Silicon Valley in general like are obsessed like with delivering particular project, and oftentimes they have multiple expertise. I think that should be a goal for each of us as well. Like if you can combine like software engineering plus one additional like expertise as a minor, that should be great. Like if you're interested like in biology, try doing like biology plus informatics. Try apply this kind of AI to your field. If you want to be like a chemist, try combine these two and so on. And you will definitely need at some point to run some experiments. So like learning Python is a great thing. And then deploying this on a larger scale with a compute and with resources is always a plus. So
it will come maybe a moment where in each, let's say, company, there is a strong compute that could be used. Meanwhile, yeah, let's see maybe how we can merge these, let's say, compute units in our own yard. We're approaching, let's say, end, and we have been mentioning domain experts, technical expertise. Anya, you had, let's say, unique opportunity to dive into the journey of actually joining efforts and the strengths in delivering an AI project. So what would you recommend to any domain experts that are coming outside of the technical field? How should they embrace the journey of AI and data?
Well, I believe that education is the key. So, and raising awareness, again, especially in Serbia. I think that people should just read a lot and talk a lot with people from technical area, because people are usually afraid of things they do not understand and they are not familiar with. So I think that's the main problem, especially in my area. I see that lawyers are generally unfamiliar with the technology, and then they try to run away from it. And I don't think that's the solution, and I don't think that's a way for anyone to improve in any way. So generally, I would say that any expert who is not a tech person should just find a tech person and talk to them, and just start educating themselves from any possible public source, and just try to see artificial intelligence as something that is a useful tool for anyone, regardless of their area, and not as something that is a threat or a danger for any one of us.
If I can, what you just said is the same in my profession of about if people, especially older people, more experienced people, when they say there's something about engineering and tech, no, they do afraid, and I do agree their education is the key, and I think organizing any kind of workshops, to learn at least basics about what does it mean building AI model, what we need for that. Mostly people think it's something about computers. So I'm not there. But I think in general in our population, younger people and people at the beginning of their careers, and people who are still trying to figure out which way they want to go in their career, I think we can provide opportunities to organize workshops, lectures, something like we are doing now, but this might be spread to other scopes, universities or other conferences, and I believe that that kind of raising awareness among every other specialty will be valuable for this society.
Well, yeah, as a Serbian AI society, we'll take that onto us, not running away from the responsibility of sharing that with the community and ecosystem. So, as Anya mentioned, you should grab maybe a techie. If you're a domain expert and need a technical guidance, grab a person. spam them with the questions. If you don't have that kind of person, reach out to Serbian AI Society. We'll try to share a lot with you guys. So thanks a lot for...
just a second, because our member on a previous conference, Nebojša Božanić, he mentioned something similar. He said, like, I think every engineer should have his own radiologist.
Yeah. Well, that's good as well. So thanks a lot, Ivana. Yeah, thanks a lot, Anja and Dene, for sharing your thoughts. Once again, I would invite everyone, if you don't have a techie in your close friends circle, please reach out to Serbian AI Society. You can find us in the Expo Zone on the -1 floor. And if you have any questions, I would invite you to the networking afterwards, so we can continue from there. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Boban.